Hello everyone, this is Stephanie Pettis in the Roland Studio, and welcome to part 2, a Tome. This is a keepsake box that I am given to my friend. Here, the original first part of the part 1 video, as you know, I lost footage, and so I thought what I would do is recreate somewhat of the same version on the inner lid. When you open the box, this is what you'd see. So I thought maybe I would do a similar recreation of that with a few differences. One, I'm out of texture paste, so naturally I had to emphasize, adapt, and overcome, and therefore I used these well, I know you're not supposed to say all the words, but you know the cutouts. I don't care, whatever. I just don't want to get a strike on my channel. I don't get paid anyway, so it's really fine by me. So anyways, I use these cutouts to give a texture on the base. As you can see, I am using a rusty door as the background. And also you can see that I am Mod Podging a part of a napkin of my birds onto the inner lid. And beside all that right there is some latex lace. Now, I wanted to show you guys how you can use latex lace. And they're so simple to do. I have a video on it. I will try to remember to put the link in the description box so that you can go back and watch how I did that and do it yourself. Right now what I've done is taken some apple barrel, just some cheap little Walmart paint, and I've watered it down. And the reason I did my little vintagey little finish on this paper this way is, for one, I didn't feel like digging out my Tim Holtz inks, stamps, you know, the little distress inks, because it's just, sometimes it's just easier to work with what you got in front of you and not dig out the mess that I have to dig out to get to it. So I'm using acrylic paints, and I'm just watering it down super thin, and I am painting around the metal rusty door that you see. And I am putting acrylic paint also all over the latex lace, because I've got some other ideas what I want to put on here in the future, and you'll see that here shortly. Here I have decided to use some Tattered Angel spray inks. They got that mica powder in them, and they're the glistening spray inks. So I wanted a pearlesque effect to give to the background with some rainbowish colors, just to throw a pop of paint and color onto this vintagey style panel. And here I am using a very thin, one little layer of cheesecloth. And I did this because I threw this on the box. I was going to make it a little thicker on the first layer, on the first part of the Tome box, but I ended up liking the way it looked with just the single layer. So I left it as a single layer, you know, because I like to do things differently. So that's what I did there. Then I'll be adding more Tattered Angel spray inks and throwing another pop of color on there. I had to dab off some of these spray inks because it was too wet, and I have a heat tool. In fact, I have 2 of them, but in my truck I don't have a big enough inverter to carry the heat and the wattage, so I just basically winged it, so I dabbed off a little bit of that shimmer mist. And here you can see I am pulling a couple of my birds from the napkin to pop them out a little brighter over the nest, since I did them, covered them with the cheesecloth. I thought I'd like them to pop out a little more than I made them pop out on the outer box. So I'm just Mod Podging there. No big woo. And as an artist, you always find yourself adjusting little things here and there. Sometimes we move too quick and then overthink it, and I try not to do that. I'm very spontaneous, but sometimes I'll go, darn, I wish I would have done this instead of that. But it's all good just the same. Now here is the Art Alchemy Prima waxes that I'll be using on my latex lace, as well as throughout the box. Here I'm using the rich copper, the antique brass, and the iron. And I'm also going to be including the metallic luster in black shimmer. And I like the black shimmer because it's a little darker than the iron. And I really wanted that latex lace to pop out with color. And here I am putting some more shimmer mist, which I didn't never do before, but I'm putting some shimmer mist over the latex lace to cover up some of those white, the details in between the lace and all of their little crevices. And I was trying to dab them back off to dry them back out, since I can't use my heat tool in my truck. So I am using the metallic luster to give this more of a metal feel on this latex lace. I will also be adding the antique brass and the rich copper to finish it off. I use the copper and the metallic, the antique brass throughout the panel. I really wanted to highlight those textures of the cheesecloth. I thought it was really fun and interesting. I did it to the top of the box, so I wanted to keep the essence the same. And if you'll notice, I'm also putting metallic over the texture that I used in place of my texture paste, the texture paper cutouts. So, punch outs. Let's say punch outs just because. Gotta keep it right for YouTube. And this is one of those moments where you're like, the aha moment. I should have left a little less paint around the edges of these this door, so that I could really pop those metal screws and bolts out. So I tried to do that just the same after I've already like put a plethora of color over it. I decided to shade around the little nuts and bolts and give it a little more of a 3D effect. It's something I didn't think about until I was on it. And then it was like, really? Why didn't I do that before? Here is some of that iron metallic wax. And I know this is in time lapse and it's a little fast, but if in order to keep this video short, I have to do this. I try to give you an idea. I don't like to skip around too much. For one, it's a lot of editing. So if I just time lapse it, you can at least see what I'm doing, and that way you have a better idea than me just giving you an idea of what I'm doing. What I am doing right here is taking some of those waxes and highlighting around the textures that I want to really pop three-dimensionally. since I didn't have the texture paste, I was going around the punch out textures that I was using out of the cardstock and three-dimensionalizing around it to give it that pop. Trying to let it show through a little bit. Now here is an example. Here is the top of the box, and I'm tying it in with the other side. I put a little adhesive spray on the inner part of this box, and one of the things I did, again, and one of those things you don't think until after it's there, I knew I wanted to include my latex lace where it is, except I didn't think about that darn lip. So I still left it there. It doesn't close quite as nice as it once did because of the magnets were covered up so much. It didn't matter, but all the same, it's okay. It's a keepsake box. I will do some sort of a tie off to keep it closed. So I used the Mona Lisa, I think is what it's called, spray adhesive, and I am just using my bone folder to give it a little bit of a crease, and I creased it a little hard and gave it a little bit of a tattered, torn look. And at first I was upset about it, but I thought, you know what, that just ages it even more, so I just rolled with it. I wasn't about to start over. And yeah, I'm just playing with my waxes. Now, here's an idea for you. It is not mine. It is my mother's idea. A couple of years ago, I was talking to her, and she had been saving the bathroom face wipes, or, you know, baby wipe little lids. And she says, I thought about you, and I thought this would be cool to make it like a locket opening or some kind of a picture frame to open. And I thought, oh my gosh, how brilliant, how simple. And that is my mom. She is so brilliant, yet so simple. And I would have never thought of that. So I do, this one was the Equate brand. So I gessoed it, and then I painted it, and then I covered it so you never saw it. Now, had I had texture paste, I probably would have covered it in some texture paste. But again, since I didn't, I just used the gesso, and then I painted it with some acrylic paint, and I threw on some micro beads around it for texture. And silly me, I should have let all that dry, but I told you, I'm an impatient crafter. My time is limited, so I'm always pushing the envelope. So I had to glue this down a couple of times because my micro beads got up underneath the wet glue that I already had there. So here's me gessoing it. I should have and that was the other thing, I should have gessoed it first. And now I'm putting on more latex lace, and this is also a latex key that you see there. I received that from the Crafters Monkey Mess group, Grace Valdivia, as a winning item that she had for one of her drawings. So I went ahead, it was a thin enough mold like the fondant molds are, and I went ahead and created some keys with that mold that I won, and I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. Now here's a tip for you. Michaels does not carry the fondant molds, okay, that I use for my latex lace. They do, however, carry molds, fondant molds for these other laces and this flower that you see. The problem with making this with latex is it's too thick of a mold. I don't recommend it. I had a very difficult time. It was an absolute mess, and I don't recommend using the Michaels fondant molds in these different. I would use paper clay in this mold instead, because you can get the same effect, but once it dries, you know, you have this beautiful mold. I managed to save the few that I used here and a couple of others, but I repeat, do not recommend the Michaels fondant molds of their little flowers, and they're very thick. And the Alex caulk, the dry fast, didn't dry fast enough in those thick molds. So, just a tip for you. Don't do it. You can try. It took about a week or more. Actually, I think it was a couple of, I don't know, it was like 7 to 10 days to get those out of there. And the rest of them I had already ruined by trying to pull them out. So they were still wet. It was awful. Don't do it. Now, what I've decided to do is to use some of this acrylic paint and paint over the gessoed frame. And I made a mistake yet again when I started. After I painted this, I was a little, shotgun on trying to create some finishes, and the acrylic paint was starting to peel off. So here is another tip. If you're going to use acrylic paint, cheap acrylic paint, over the top of plastic or something like that, seal it. I failed to seal it, and I sealed it with Mod Podge. That's it. But before I did, it was peeling the paint off as I was trying to create finishes. And I think I leave that in here so that you can see. Right now, I am using a pavement black from the Apple Barrel collection, I think, to paint all of the molds and the lid. And I'm also giving it a little more dimension on the paper by highlighting and giving it great shadows so that it pops all of the colors that I have out. Because if you don't, it'll blend in so much together, and you really want your artwork to pop. So that's why I created these in black. Now that's where I realized you can't paint that acrylic on top of something and then use your metallic waxes. It'll just peel off. So here I am putting a layer of Mod Podge to seal it. I'm sure there's other sealants you can use. In fact, I have some, but I didn't use it because I wanted it to be quick. I know that Mod Podge dries fairly quick. Once that was dry, I was then able to use my metallic luster. And you will see how that acrylic, that dark acrylic paint, leaves shadows for depth and definition in your work. I love it. Especially that key. I'm never satisfied, and I want to play with all the colors. This is the antique brass that I am adding also on top of the metallic luster, the black shimmer. This is the antique brass. And if that wasn't enough, I threw some copper in it too. Because, oh yeah, and look here, this is the turquoise that I gave it to give it an essence of old, just old metal. So I wanted that hint of turquoise wax in there as well. I love the way it created such a three-dimensional effect, and just has that little blue essence to it. It's not overpowering, it's not overbearing, and it just gives it a very whimsical and dreamy, like castle, old medieval style feel. I love it. You can see all my micro beads got stuck in the bottom. I'm letting everything dry that you see. So I thought I would go ahead and also do a base inside the box. Because anytime I alter a box, I love to Mod Podge it. I'm a Mod Podge freak, fool. I'll Mod Podge anything. Bottles. I love making my bottles. And I don't remember if I did a video on one, but I will if I haven't. I'll have to go back and look. I don't think I have. I did one on a jar, but not a wine bottle. And I apologize for my voice. I was really sick today. Let's just say it was an exorcist moment. It wasn't pretty. And it was more than one moment. I had it a couple of times today. I decided to get out this lace style napkin to add on the sides for my border of the box, the inner border of the box. Can't ever have too much lace. It's beautiful. I love this one. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that there are some extra things that I have done to this box that I did not film. And I haven't decided whether I'm going to include it in this video. I'll see. It depends. I'm running out of time. I'm just really wanting to get this video out. I'll have to go back and add some recording to it to do so. And I just haven't made up my mind. Bada bing, you guys. There's the rust crust. Oh. Did you say rust? I want to talk about my rust crust, by the way. I did, in fact, use the $1 metal containers from the Dollar Tree to put my rust crust in. And I'm going to tell you, those little $1 metal containers did just fine for me. On the brown and on the orange. A little bit of the yellow the yellow dried out a little bit. I've noticed I've had to add some Mod Podge. I went ahead and picked up some containers to put my patina pastes in, so to see if the patinas work out a little better versus the little can, the little plastic I got from Michael, plastic containers from Michael, to maybe see if I have better luck with it. It was the type of paint that I think that I used. I've been fighting a little bit of the gummy on my, so I'm gonna try another batch down the road and maybe use a more expensive, more quality acrylic paints to recreate my rust crust and my patinas. I'm still gonna, the Apple Barrel and the cheap Walmart brands, whatever, the Folk Art, whatever, worked for me. I just noticed I'm having to add a little bit of glue to them to give them a little moisture. But they're still working. Look at that rust. And I did add more orange to my orange because I noticed it last time in my video. I noticed it was still a little too yellow. And the yellow popped from the other yellow, but it wasn't orange enough. And I really wanted that orange rust to pop out. So there's the brown, there's the orange, and then a pop of yellow, and then we come back with a pop of patina blue and a pop of patina green. It's amazing. I love this stuff. You know, I've never been a rust crust person. I never even knew it was a thing. And it's taken me a few years to get into the rust movement. But now that I'm here, I'm loving it. And I'm sure you will too. And I'm not sure what music you're hearing at this very moment, but I do create, most of my videos have my music. Every now and again, I do get lazy and put some of the phone music in here that I can use on my videos, but 90% of the time, they're mine. I do need to make some new songs. Just saying. I know at the beginning of this one, it was called Songs in the Mist, because it was all birds, and I love that. So since I was doing birds, I thought it was appropriate. Now, I wanted to bring the fact that this box is still a tome box, which a tome is just a big fat book. And so I wanted to make sure that I brought the book pages into the box. I hadn't thought about it. It was just something, I was like going through my papers, and I found these papers, and I said, I really need to throw some book papers back into this box to not lose the essence of the fact that it is a tome. And yet again, I had my paints out, not my distressed inks. So I watered them down and I aged them with some cheap acrylic paint. If you're like me and you're cheap and you don't have every color under the sun, get some Apple Barrel or cheap little folk art acrylic paint, add some water to it, water it down, and you will not be sorry. In fact, I stopped using my brush and I just started dipping the stuff in there. I used the brush initially for the thick paints, but once it was watering down to nothing, I just started throwing it in there. And I just thought it was an awesome way. It's an awesome way to age your papers without a high dollar attached to it. Just another tip. I am Mod Podging my little torn pages inside of the box in different parts. I didn't overdo it, but I wanted to throw some of that book back in there. I just think that's awesome. I loved it. I hope you do too. I'll put that inside as well, and then I'll let that dry. Here is my Art Deco oil-based gold leafing pen. And when I made my initial box with gold leafing pages, I totally forgot I had this pen. So I made my own version of what it would look like to have gold leaf with this pen. I did my own gold leafing with acrylic paints again, and some metallic paints. It was a cheap way, and it really, really worked out nicely. But when I come across my Art Deco gold leafing pen, I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to do that on this part because it still shows like there's newness to the inside. And I thought that was a really unique touch. It's all old on the outside, but it still has that great, fabulous gold shimmer, brass finish on the inside of that closure. And so since I had my pen out, I thought I would go ahead and gold leaf bits and pieces around this project, because who doesn't love a dab or do a dab or two, yabba dabba two, a dab or two will do. And I even threw some on the outside just to show that at one point there was some newness to it. Get creative. It's your art. I put some on the key to leave some shimmer there. I can't leave this key alone, by the way. I don't know how many times I went over that key. Sorry, the time lapse is really fast. I used a metal trim. Actually, they're plastic. I think I got those beads, the metal looking trim. It was a trim. I think I got it from Hobby Lobby, but they're actually plastic, but they've come in so handy, and I'm out and I need some more. I love them. And I'm adding some gold leaf in various places on the outside of my box. And I also am adding some book pages to the front of my box, just because I wanted to tie it in. And now to age and play with the inside of the box. I added some antique brass, gold, and metal. I even used some metallic luster in a coral color inside my box on top of the Mod Podged napkin. There's no limit to what you can do. And after all of this was over with, I put a simple little message inside of the closure. Oh yes, let's not forget. Okay, let me just stop my other thought. I'm running out of time, so I decided to paint my the backside of my tome with brown acrylic. I didn't even use my rust crust up front. I just painted it brown. And then I wanted to round that off for a book, but I totally forgot about it, and I had already glued my latex lace to that binder, and I just didn't want to tear it up and start over, so I left it flat. For that, I apologize, because the intention was to build a rounded form with the hugs on it to make a binder look more like a tome. So I might should have labeled this, differently, since I messed up the fact that the tome has the rounded binder, but you get the point. I also decided to go ahead and paint the bottom of the box. Not like anybody's really going to see it, but I don't like to leave anything unfinished. A little patina. And I go back over this dry box on the front and add a little more patina for the pop of color. Now, I don't know if you saw that, but there was my faux, I made faux pages of gold leaf on the either side of that box. And then I kind of messed it up by adding some gold leaf with my gold leaf pen on it, but it's okay. I left the other side plain. It is what it is. Sorry, I was in my jammies.